I do not deny that science explains, but I postulate God to explain why science explains. The very success of science in showing us how deeply orderly the natural world is provides strong grounds for believing that there is an even deeper cause for that order. Richard Swinburne. We should not let ourselves forget precisely what method is and what it is not. A method, at least in the sciences, is a systematic set of limitations and constraints voluntarily assumed by a researcher in order to concentrate his or her investigations upon a strictly defined aspect of or approach to a clearly delineated object. As such, it allows one to see further and more perspicuously in one particular instance and in one particular way, but only because one has first consented to confine oneself to a narrow portion of the visible spectrum, so to speak. Moreover, while a given method may grant one a glimpse of truths that would remain otherwise obscure, that method is not itself a truth. This is crucial to understand. A method, considered in itself, may even in some ultimate sense be false as an explanation of things and yet still be probative as an instrument of investigation. Some things are more easily seen through a red filter, but to go through life wearing rose-colored spectacles is not to see things as they truly are. When one forgets the distinction between method and truth, one becomes foolishly prone to respond to any question that cannot be answered from the vantage of one's particular methodological perch by dismissing it as nonsensical, or by issuing a promissory note guaranteeing a solution to the problem at some juncture in the remote future, or by simply distorting the question into one that looks like the kind one really can answer after all. Whenever modern scientific method is corrupted in this fashion, the results are especially unfortunate. In such cases, an admirably severe discipline of interpretive and theoretical restraint has been transformed into its perfect and irrepressibly wanton opposite. What began as a principled refusal of metaphysical speculation, for the sake of specific empirical inquiries, has now been mistaken for a comprehensive knowledge of the metaphysical shape of reality. The art of humble questioning has been mistaken for the sure possession of ultimate conclusions. David Bentley Hart. The experience of God, being, consciousness, bliss, the most general phenomenon that provides evidence for the existence of God is the existence of the physical universe for as long as it has existed, whether a finite time or, if it has no beginning, an infinite time. This is something evidently inexplicable by science, for a scientific explanation as such explains the occurrence of one state of affairs S1 in terms of a previous state of affairs S2 and some law of nature which makes states like S2 bring about states like S1. Thus it may explain the planets being in their present positions by a previous state of the system, the sun and planets being where they were last year, and the operation of Kepler's laws which state that states like the latter are followed a year later by states like the former. But what science by its very nature cannot explain is why there are any states of affairs at all. My next phenomenon is the operation of the most general laws of nature, that is, the orderliness of nature in conforming to very general laws of physics, from which the regularities of chemistry and biology follow. What exactly the most general laws of science may not yet have discovered. Perhaps they're the field equations of Einstein's general theory of relativity, or more likely there are some yet more fundamental laws. Perhaps the laws of a theory of everything. Now science can explain why one law operates in some narrow area, in terms of the operation of a wider law in the particular conditions of that narrow area. Thus it can explain why Galileo's law of fall holds, that small objects near the surface of the Earth fall with a constant acceleration towards the Earth. Galileo's law follows from Newton's laws, given that the Earth is a massive body far from other massive bodies and the objects on its surface are close to it and small in mass in comparison. But what science by its very nature cannot explain is why there are the most general laws of nature that there are, for ex hypothesi, no wider laws can explain their operation. That there is a universe and that there are laws of nature are phenomena so general and pervasive that we tend to ignore them. But there might so easily not have been a universe at all, ever, or the universe might so easily have been a chaotic mess. That there is an orderly universe is something very striking, yet beyond the capacity of science ever to explain. Science's inability to explain these things is not a temporary phenomenon, caused by the backwardness of 21st century science rather, because of what a scientific explanation is, these things will ever be beyond its capacity to explain. For scientific explanations by their very nature terminate with some ultimate natural or an ultimate arrangement of physical things, and the questions I am raising are why there are natural laws and physical things at all. However, there is another kind of explanation of phenomena which we use all the time and which we see as a proper way of explaining phenomena. This is what I shall call personal explanation. We often explain some phenomenon E as brought about by a person P in order to achieve some purpose or goal. G. The present motion of my lips is explained as brought about by me for the purpose of delivering a lecture. The cup being on the table is explained by a person having put it there for the purpose of drinking out of it. Yet this is a different way of explaining things from the scientific. Scientific explanation involves laws of nature and previous states of affairs. Personal explanation involves persons and purposes. If we cannot give a scientific explanation of the existence and orderliness of the universe, perhaps we can give a personal explanation. But why should we think that the existence and orderliness of the universe has an explanation at all? We seek for an explanation of all things, but we have seen that we only have reason for supposing that we have found one if the purported explanation is simple, and leads us to expect what we find when that is otherwise not to be expected. The history of science shows that we judge that phenomena that are many and complex need explaining, and that they are to be explained in terms of something simpler. The motions of the planets, subject to Kepler's laws, the mechanical interactions of bodies on Earth, the behavior of pendula, the motions of tides, the behavior of comets, etc., formed a pretty miscellaneous set of phenomena. Newton's laws of motion constituted a simple theory that led us to expect these phenomena, and it was judged to be a true explanation of them. The existence of thousands of different chemical substances combining in different ratios to make other substances was complex. The hypothesis that there were only 100 or so chemical elements of which the thousands of substances were made was a simple hypothesis that led us to expect a complex phenomenon. Our universe is a complex thing. There are lots and lots of separate chunks of matter in the universe. The chunks have each a different finite and not very natural volume, shape, mass, etc. Consider the vast diversity of the galaxies, stars and planets, and pebbles on the seashore. Matter is inert and has no powers that it can choose to exert. It does what it has to do. There is a limited amount of it in any region and it has a limited amount of energy and velocity. The universe is a large and complex thing. The conformity of objects throughout endless time and space to simple laws is likewise something which cries out for explanation in yet simpler terms. For let us consider what this amounts to. Laws are not things, independent of material objects. To say that all objects conform to laws is simply to say that they all behave in exactly the same way, that they have certain powers which they exert on other objects, and liabilities to exert those powers in certain circumstances. To say, for example, that the planets obey Kepler's laws is just to say that each planet at each moment of time has the power of moving in the way that Kepler's laws state, and the liability to do so while the sun and other planets are there. There is therefore this vast coincidence in the powers and liabilities of objects at all times and in all places. If all the coins of some region have the same markings, or all the papers in a room are written in the same handwriting, we seek an explanation in terms of a common source of these coincidences. We should seek a similar explanation for that vast coincidence we describe as the conformity of objects to laws of nature. For example, the fact that all the electrons are produced, attract and repel other particles and combine with them in exactly the same way at each point of endless time and space. The hypothesis of theism is that the universe exists because there is a divine person who keeps it in existence and that laws of nature operate because there is a divine person who brings it about that they do. He brings it about that the laws of nature operate by sustaining in every object in the universe its liability to behave in accord with those laws. He brings it about that the universe exists by sustaining at each moment, of finite or infinite time, objects with the powers and liabilities codified by laws of nature including the laws of the conservation of matter energy. That is by making it the case at each moment that what there was before continues to exist. The hypothesis is a hypothesis that a person brings about these things for some purpose. He acts directly on the universe, as we act directly on our brains, guiding them to move our limbs, but the universe is not his body, for he could at any moment destroy it, and act on another universe, or do without the universe. As we have seen, personal explanation and scientific explanation are the two ways we have of explaining the occurrence of phenomena. Since there cannot be a scientific explanation of the existence of the universe, either there is a personal explanation or there is no explanation at all. The hypothesis that there is a divine person is the hypothesis of the existence of the simplest kind of person there could be. A person is a being who exists for some time with power to bring about effects, knowledge of how to do so, and freedom to make choices of which effects to bring about. A divine person is by definition an everlasting omnipotent, that is, infinitely powerful, omniscient, that is, all-knowing, and perfectly free person. He is an everlasting person of infinite power, knowledge and freedom. A person to whose existence, power, knowledge and freedom there are no limits except those of logic. The hypothesis that there exists a being with infinite degrees of the qualities essential to a being of that kind is the postulation of a very simple being, and it is simpler to suppose that these properties are not accidentally correlated with each other but follow necessarily from the essence of the divine person. The hypothesis that there is such a divine person is a much simpler hypothesis than the hypothesis that there is a God who has such and such a limited power. It is simpler in just the same way that the hypothesis that some particle has zero mass or infinite velocity is simpler than the hypothesis that it has 0.32147 of some unit of mass or a velocity of 221.000 km/s. A finite limitation cries out for an explanation of why there is just that particular limit, in a way that limitlessness does not. It follows from God's perfect freedom that he will be subject to no influences deterring him from doing what he sees reason to do. That is what he believes good to do, and since being omniscient, he will always know what is good. He will always do what is good. He will be perfectly good. That there should exist anything at all, let alone a universe as complex and as orderly as ours, is exceedingly strange. But if there is a God, it is not vastly unlikely that he should create such a universe. A universe such as ours is a thing of beauty, and a theatre in which humans and other creatures can grow and work out their destiny. The orderliness of the universe makes it a beautiful universe, but, even more importantly, it makes it a universe which humans can learn to control and change. A good God will want to create creatures such as humans, having a free choice between good and evil, a deep responsibility for themselves and each other, and an ability to form their own character in such a way as to love God. And for that we need bodies, places where we can take hold of each other and so hurt or benefit each other, but we can only look after ourselves and each other, or choose not to do so. If there are simple laws governing a universe in which humans are embodied, if we have bodies, then there are ways in which we can hurt or benefit each other. But only if there are simple laws of nature which we can come to know will there be ways in which my doing this or that will make a predictable difference to me or you. Only if humans know that by sowing certain seeds, weeding and watering them, they will get corn, can they develop in agriculture. And only if they know that by rubbing sticks together they can make fire will they be able, if that is what they choose, to burn the food supplies of others. Graspable laws of nature allow agents a choice of how to treat each other. So God has good reason to make an orderly universe and, ex hypothesi, being omnipotent, he has the power to do so. So the hypothesis that there is a God makes the existence of the universe much more to be expected than it would otherwise be, and it is a very simple hypothesis. Hence the arguments from the existence of the universe and its conformity to simple natural laws are good arguments to an explanation of the phenomena, and provide substantial evidence for the existence of God. The last phenomenon I shall consider is the evolution of animals and humans. In the middle of the 19th century, Darwin set out his impressive theory of evolution by natural selection to account for the existence of animals and humans. Once upon a time there were primitive organisms. These animals varied in various ways from their parents. Some were taller, some shorter, some fatter, some thinner, some had the beginnings of a wing, others did not, and so on. Those animals with characteristics that made them best fitted to survive, survived and handed on their characteristics to the next generation. But, although in general resembling their parents, their offspring varied from them, and those variations that best fitted the animal to survive were again the ones most likely to be handed on to another generation. This process went on for millions of years, producing the whole range of animals we have today, each adapted to survive in a different environment. Among the characteristics giving advantage in the struggle for survival was intelligence, and the selections for this characteristic eventually led to the evolution of man. Such is Darwin's account of why we have today animals and humans. As far as it goes, his account is surely right, but there are crucial matters beyond its scope. The evolutionary mechanism Darwin describes only works because there are certain laws of biochemistry. Animals produce many offspring. These vary in various ways from their parents, etc. But why are there these laws rather than other laws? No doubt because these laws follow from the basic laws of physics. But then why do the basic laws of physics have such a form as to give rise to laws of evolution? And why were there the primitive organisms in the first place? A plausible story can be told of how the primeval soup of matter energy at the time of the Big Bang, a moment some 15,000 million years ago at which, scientists now tell us, the universe, or at least the present stage of the universe, began, gave rise over many millennia, in accordance with physical laws, to those primitive organisms. But then why was there matter suitable for such evolutionary development in the first place? With respect to the laws and with respect to the primeval matter, we have again the same choice, of saying that these things cannot be further explained, or of postulating a further explanation. The issue here is not why there are laws at all or why there is matter at all, but why the laws and the matter have this peculiar character, that they are ready wound up to produce plants, animals and humans. Since it is the most general laws of nature that have this special character, there can be no scientific explanation of why they are as they are. And although there might be a scientific explanation of why the matter at the time of the Big Bang had the special character it did, in terms of its character at some earlier time, clearly if there was a first state of the universe, it must have been of a certain kind, or if the universe has lasted forever, in addition to having the right kind of laws, its matter needed to have had at all times certain general features, for example in respect of the quantity of its matter energy. If at any time there was to be a state of the universe suited to produce plants, animals and humans, scientific explanation comes to a stop. The question remains whether we should accept these particular features of the laws and matter of the universe as ultimate brute facts or whether we should move beyond them to a personal explanation in terms of the agency of God. What the choice turns on is how likely it is that the laws and initial conditions should by chance have just this character. Recent scientific work has drawn attention to the fact that the universe is fine-tuned, given laws of the present type, the four forces, constrained by the requirements of quantum theory. The matter energy at the time or the Big Bang had to have a certain density and a certain velocity of recession. Increase or decrease in these respects by 1 part in a million would have had the effect that the universe was not life-evolving. For example, if the Big Bang had caused the quanta of matter energy to recede from each other a little more quickly, no galaxies, stars or planets, and no environment suitable for life, would have been formed. If the recession had been marginally slower, the universe would have collapsed in on itself before life could be formed. Similarly, the constants in laws of nature needed to lie within very narrow limits if life was to be formed. If we allow the possibility of laws of other types than those that actually operate in our universe, they would have to be very special kinds, no more simple than the actual ones. And so again it is a priori very unlikely that sentient life would evolve. It is, therefore, most unlikely that laws and initial conditions should have by chance a life-producing character. God is able to give matter and laws this character. If we can show that he would have reason to do so, then that gives support to the hypothesis that he has done so. There is available again the reason which, additional to the reason of its beauty, was a reason why God would choose to bring about an orderly universe at all. The worthwhileness of the sentient embodied beings that the evolutionary process would bring about, and above all of humans, who can themselves make informed choices as to what sort of a world there should be. So the three arguments I have considered, from the existence of the universe, from its conformity to natural laws, and from the existence humans and animals, to the hypothesis of the existence of God, are all arguments that satisfy well the three criteria given earlier for inductive arguments to an explanation. The phenomena cited by the premises are not ordinarily to be expected, they are to expected if the cause postulated in the conclusion exists, and the hypothesis of the existence of that cause is simple. Indeed, I suggest that not merely are these good arguments for the existence of God, but they are very strong ones. The postulated divine person is a very simple one, and it is vastly improbable that the phenomena cited should occur by chance. For example, that there should exist such an enormous number of atoms in the universe, all of which behave in exactly the same human life-producing way. Of course, the God to whom these arguments point is a person, or persons, about whom we can know only those properties responsible for the phenomena I have been discussing, his omnipotence, omniscience and perfect freedom, and other properties, which, I believe, are consequences of these. For example, omnipresence and perfect goodness. Of what underlies these properties, of that in which the properties inhere, we cannot have any full understanding. But for the human pilgrim in this life, the former is quite enough, and some human pilgrims in the modern world need the strong inductive arguments that are available to show the existence of a God having these properties. Richard Swinburne.